The humble personal computer now, more than ever, comes in a huge variety of shapes and sizes. If you're unfamiliar with the mini ITX size PCs, your first question when seeing one might be, is that a computer? And then probably followed by, why is it that small? Or perhaps just simply, why? Why would anyone want a PC like that? Well, for a start, they take up less space, which means they more easily fit on your desk, keeping them off the floor where things like dust, debris, and small children like to gather. The Ghost S1 here from Louqe that I built my PC in, this being the older Mark II revision, is on the smaller side of small, compared to say the size of a shoe, a banana, or a banana in a shoe. They're also, arguably, more stylish than the drab boxes you might find in an office or a classroom. The Ghost S1 here is so minimalistically stylish, in fact, that it doesn't even have the usual USB or audio front I/O. And that brings me to the trade-offs. For a start, hardware inside cases like these are limited to smaller mini ITX motherboards and SFX power supplies. While there's not much difference functionally between the different form factors, it does mean that if you were to downsize, it's not as simple as transplanting the guts from the office big man into the schoolyard little boy. Also, this case came out in a time before 2-in-1 space heater and GPU combo units were common. So, while it did come with an included PCIe riser cable in this case, and older Gen 3 version, which is still pretty ace, it unfortunately only has room for 2-slot expansion devices in this space. For some, this limitation could very well be a deal breaker. For me though, given the hardware I'm planning to put inside, Speaking of getting things to fit though, the Ghost S1 does have one party piece up its sleeve, in the form of these optional extra module extensions, which Louqe refers to as top hats. Together with the included top rail, this extra room allows for things like installing additional hard drives, using a water cooling radiator, or just as a convenient place to stash a banana. So then, let's get to the upgrade. Since it's pretty obvious by now that I'll be reusing this enclosure, we'll need to first evict the old tenants. The first step, then, is to get inside, and for that, we'll need the key. Louqe includes this dinky little tool for the Torx head screws that holds the unit together. However, if you're going to commit breaking and entering in here, I would highly suggest bringing your own tools. It's not strictly necessary, but unless you have good dexterity with small parts, a screwdriver will make your life easier. Anyway, getting kicked out is the Intel i5-8600K, together with its Z370GB motherboard, along with this set of 32GB 3600 Corsair Vengeance low-profile RAM. To be clear, at the moment this is still a solid configuration. The only reason they're getting the unceremonious boot is to make way for the younger and more attractive replacements. Say hello to my little friend, the AMD Ryzen 7 5800X. Okay, so it's not the newest and greatest. It doesn't even have 3D in its name. But there is one good reason why I'll be using this CPU specifically, and that's because it was given to me. You see, once this used to belong to a friend of mine, a very good friend. He had it in his system where it ran reliably and faithfully. But, as fate would have it, a couple months back, he upgraded to something newer. And that's how it got handed down. That will be going into this ASUS B550 motherboard with 32 gigs of 3600 MHz Corsair Vengeance RAM. This incoming new memory is pretty much identical to the outgoing old kit, except now it comes with built-in Christmas lights. Now I know opinion is divided when it comes to this feature. Some look at it and say, "Oh, how gratuitously grotesque and unnecessarily superfluous." While others might look and say, Purdy. I am both these personalities, which is why I'll be adding just a dash of that RGB hot sauce. I'll be keeping the Corsair SF750 power supply that I'm already using, as well as the Noctua L12 Ghost S1 Edition CPU heatsink. There's a funny story about how Louqe teamed up with Noctua to make a cooler specifically tailored for their case. During development of the S1, Louqe was testing different coolers from different manufacturers and found that the Noctua L12, without its larger top fan, worked best in terms of noise and performance and was just small enough to fit. Unfortunately, Noctua around the same time, unaware of what Louqe was doing, were making developments of their own, and they decided that their cooler model worked best if they made it just a little bit taller and changed the fans to a single larger slim fan instead, which they then released as the L12S. This increase in height was just enough such that it no longer fit in the Ghost without user modification. So Louqe, having engineered a product around a now defunct Noctua product, went to Noctua and presumably had a conversation that went something along the lines of bro, 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 And today we have the L12 Ghost S1 edition. A cooler, for all intents and purposes, is identical to the original L12, but now with a single bottom fan. I'm also going to keep my two NVMe SSDs for storage, a 250 gig drive for my operating system, and a larger 2TB one for pretty much everything else. And finally, a GTX 1080. Grandpa here might be getting on a bit in his advanced stage, but it's still perfectly functional. It's still a solid B tier when it comes to the most demanding modern games, and maybe even an A tier on less crazy games. So rather than upgrading my GPU, what I've done instead is, well, I've graded it. Given that GPUs are typically the single most expensive component in a computer, I'd rather wait for a deal than pay for one that costs as much as an entire system. Also, there's an Noctua fan for a bit of case exhaust. Anyway, now that the gang's all here, all that's left to do is assemble it together. No. And just like that, it's now nighttime. You might have noticed that I've opted not to use the top hat in this build, and that I'm also using this rather stylish copper grill. It's another optional extra, but I quite like the way it looks. And with everything assembled, how does it run? Well, with that old timer of a GPU, it's more of a leisurely jog than a sprint. But as you can see from this game with the cybers and the punks, it's still perfectly fine. I'm not going to pretend that my many years old graphics card can still spit out frames like the newest and greatest. Well, at least I haven't hit any unexpected problems. Ow! As for those displaced refugees from earlier, there'll be a happy ending for them too, because they're getting reassigned to HDPC duty. But that's another grotesquely gratuitous build for another grotesquely gratuitous day. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and remember, roses are red, bananas are high in potassium. Oh,